We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Brian, if you could lead us. Are there any changes to the agenda? Or can we move straight to approval of the agenda? Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Call for, Phil, Bob, I think it was.
Bob, sorry, yeah.
We're so far.
Call for a vote. Approved. Are there any announcements tonight? We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. I believe everyone has a copy of the minutes for the October 13th meeting. Do we have any changes? We ready to approve?
Move to approve. I'll have noon to read them. So I like Bob to write it, so I'll move approval.
You'd have to second. Bob just moved.
And second.
Bob has moved. Phil has seconded. Vote. Minutes are approved. We have no reports or old business tonight, so we can move straight into the new business. First item of business is the bylaw amendment that was distributed on September 10th, more than 2 weeks ago. The amendment would change Article 9, Section 5 to read, alternates may participate in meeting discussions during the information gathering phase, but shall not participate in deliberations nor vote on agenda items until and unless appointed as a commission member. As the person who drafted this, I'll speak first. I drafted this because the statute says minimum 5, maximum 9. We are 12. We exceed the statutory maximum, and I believe that we should not just ignore the statute. We should not flout the statute. We should go ahead and reduce the number of active participants to the statutory number of 9. Open the floor for discussion. Do we need to go around, or are we only going to have a few comments?
I have a few comments.
Go ahead.
Let's go around then. Bob, anything?
I agree with you, with your comments, basically. It seems to me like we should make a motion and see if we get a second and then have discussion.
I think we can discuss this first and then see whether we need a motion. Okay. Tamara?
The 9 stipulated in the statute is 9 voting members. That's not changing.
No, it doesn't say voting members, it says members.
It says 9 members,
That's correct.
which we have 9 voting members.
And the statute does not allow for the existence of alternates. We have created that ourselves.
If the statute did not allow for the 12 members of the alternate members, then they shouldn't have been here from the beginning. If that's a problem, then that should have been corrected a long time ago. Doing it midstream is very problematic in many ways. It shows a lack of transparency on this commission. If there was something that should have been done, I think legal would have let us know a long time ago that this was not correct. And we have not had any ruling to that effect, and it's been 4.5 months. It's 3 people. We're not talking about an extended large group. And to be honest, 2 of them are female. So by voting for this, you are essentially cutting out half of the female voice. And these 2 females, all they have is to offer their opinion. They can't vote anyway. So not allowing them to speak does not give this commission and a lot to you a very good reputation. I mean, I know you had dealt with that at the community meeting, the public comment meeting. This absolutely leads to that, and voting for that leads to that, and puts a really bad stain on this commission and not allowing everybody to have a voice. And I've said that from the very first meeting, that everybody should have a voice. These are equal members, maybe not in voting, but in their opinion and who they are absolutely equal members, and they deserve the right to be able to speak their opinion. They have been here every step of the way along with the rest of us. To diminish them and diminish their voice is wrong.
Joan, any comments?
Yes, I agree with everything that Tamara said, and in addition to that, it was noted in a previous meeting that part of the reason for this was it takes a lot of time to go around to 12 people versus 9. And I don't think time is a valid reason, in my opinion. The time factor should not enter into the deliberations at all. Rushing through a process is not how we want to deliberate. And I would hope that that would be taken into consideration. I think all of us, as Tamara mentioned, have salient points that we would like to discuss with the membership as a whole. And even though we're not allowed to vote, we may have an insight that somebody else might not have thought about, and it should be taken under deliberation. So those are my comments.
Bill, any comments?
Yes, I do. I think it's very important what we're discussing here, and I feel it's being treated kind of lightly. Let me tell you what I feel. An alternate member actually means a person appointed by the county legislative authority who is qualified under law to substitute for a board member who is disqualified or becomes unavailable for any reason. No statute allows an alternate in any manner as a board member unless and until they have been designated by the board chair to sit in the place of a member who is absent or disqualified. In addition, no alternate can be appointed as an officer of any board. Let me state, this is not personal. I didn't even know most of you other than one I knew partially prior to being appointed to this review commission. But my concern here is both procedural, but also legally. That is, not jeopardizing the law. A number of years ago, after I had left government, which was not in Idaho, I was friends with an assistant county attorney. I was talking to him one day, and he said, when it comes to appealing a government action, he uses 3 criteria. First, is the action consistent with the definition established by the law? The definition here is, are we recommending, and only recommending, a form of government that is defined by the statute? Second, he would look to the procedures. Was it advertised? Was it hearing conducted properly? Were notices sent? Were public hearings conducted properly? Then third, all that being proper, the definition is correct, the procedure is correct. At that point, then he would argue the law. You know, David, you're on the Planning and Zoning Board. I think you're the chairperson. And I understand that's held to a higher standard. And the reason for that is because it's a quasi-judicial matter. But if any action is done improper to that procedure, then it is going to be overturned by the courts. And whatever decision you make is basically overruled and serve no purpose. I recognize that what we are doing is legislative. It is not quasi-judicial like a zoning hearing. But it's just important to me that we act according to the law. Now, after some discussion at the beginning of this whole process, 7 of us agreed, myself included, to allow the alternates to participate in our public review process in questioning the interviewees. All meetings are recorded and open to the public. However, when the public hearing is closed, and all are at some point, whether it's this one or a zoning one or whatever, at whatever point they're closed, the deliberation portion is different, and the legal rules and procedures must be followed. Now, perhaps the most familiar comparison is a jury alternate. When the trial is over and the jury is in deliberation, the alternates are dismissed. Their job is done. Now, this is not a jury, but there are procedures that we should be following. At this point, it's our job, the 9 members who are appointed, to deliberate, to discuss, to evaluate, prepare a recommendation to submit to the Board of County Commissioners. The Idaho Code establishes the authority for this committee to be appointed in accordance with Title 31. And in accordance to Idaho law, Title 31 also states The study commission shall consist of not more than 9 members. The deliberation portion is recorded but not open to public input. At this point, the alternates really are members of the public and should not be part of the deliberations, or it could be argued that we, as a study commission, allowed a certain public to participate, but not all of the public. At this point, the alternates are simply members of that public. As the process goes forward now, the public input will occur at the ballot box, which is appropriate, and how this should actually end up. Without knowing what might be recommended, one of our early interviewees here at this committee was very clear that any recommended change will be challenged in the courts. If a court case is filed, which it might be, it will not be based on a definition that we didn't do it right, or a procedure that we didn't follow it correctly. That legal challenge will have to be based on the law, and I feel pretty comfortable that the law lets us be here and do what we're doing. Let me stress finally, there are only 9 committee members appointed in this study commission. No one of the 9 members have needed to be replaced, so the alternate's job at this point is done. If we allow alternate participation, then we allow in 3 members of the public, which is what their position is at this point, to participate at the exclusion to other members of the public. My concern is that that is contrary to the state statute. Anyone can challenge the law, but we as a committee must not allow the definition of procedural changes be the option they use in the courts. Accordingly, I do not believe that the alternatives not only should not, but cannot be allowed to participate from this point forward. Thank you.
Bruce?
Where were you a few months ago, Phil? Why are we just having this discussion now? Why all of a sudden are we doing our investigation into what's right and what's wrong after we approve the bylaws, or you approve the bylaws, and after we've gone through this process? That's kind of irresponsible, wouldn't you say?
You want me to answer you?
No, I don't.
Okay, then continue on. I should address the crowd instead of me.
Well, I'm addressing your words.
Then you're not addressing them correctly, but that's okay.
Well, you know, these conversations should have happened in the very beginning when these bylaws were being crafted.
Well, it did happen in the beginning. We agreed, okay, for the public portion, office to participate in that question.
Well-
And that seemed fair and reasonable to me at the time.
Uh,
At this point, the rules changed.
The rules changed, and that's the key. The rules change as we play the game. You see, the alternates, all we do is speak words. We have no vote. You never see my arm go up when it comes to any of these meetings, any of these decisions that are made. It's just words. And what's interesting is the fact that people don't seem to like some of the words that some of the people say in this particular commission. It makes me wonder if, you know, this isn't about controlling, you know, the narrative a little bit. But I understand your point, Phil. You know, the rules are the rules for the commission. It's just surprising that today is the day we have that discussion, and it was never brought up or looked at prior to today, which is on the eve of the deliberations. So, you know, it's very suspect. And the other part that I find to be a little suspect is the fact that Mr. Botting, our chair, didn't skip a heartbeat between asking me to resign and then wanting to change the bylaws to preclude the alternates from being able to participate in the deliberations. And he didn't say because of formalities with the commission. He said in an effort to save time, which is different. So, you know, I find the whole event here to be suspect. And it's surprising that anyone in this commission would be afraid of anyone who's participating in this commission to say words. But the other thing too, and I'll be quick, is that there's been discussion among the commission members that they really want the public support behind the decisions or the recommendations that come out of this commission. And anything you do to silence people to use procedure to keep people from having a voice who've had a voice all along, you're just going to hurt your ability to make the case for your recommendation. I really don't see how someone's going to sue the county because a commission makes a recommendation to the BOCC that has to go on the ballot. But I guess, anything's possible, certainly in this particular era, a litigious society. So anyhow, that's kind of where I stand on it, and I hope that the commission members do want to hear from the alternates, because we've been participating from day one. Thank you.
Brian? Brian, comments?
I don't have a lot to add. I do tend to agree, or I do agree with Tamara and Joan. I don't see that the statute anywhere governs how we conduct our deliberation, and maybe I'm incorrect on that. It seems to me that we can conduct our deliberation however we see fit. And I personally have gained a lot from the insights and questions that all of the commissioners, including the alternates, have engaged in during this process. So I value their opinions. I hope we can hear them. Thank you.
Brian?
So I take note of the statute itself. It does say.
Brian, can you turn your mic on, please?
Yeah, I do take note of the statute itself and the words in it. Section 315101, appointment of a study commission, and it does say the Board of County Commissioners may by resolution appoint a study commission comprised of not less than 5 nor more than 9 members to study the existing form of county government, compare it to other optional forms, and submit a report and any recommendations for the change of the board. So you do have a point about 9 members. There are alternates, of course, that were appointed to serve in that capacity should one member not be available or have to fall off, of course. And we have had that opportunity for alternates to share views throughout this process so far. I think, Phil, your analysis was an interesting one and a good one. But I think, one, this motion, for better or worse, ought to have the benefit of the county attorney opinion on it. I really think that's necessary here. And two, I think there's one reason for perhaps allowing these alternates to engage in the deliberations phase, and that's kind of discretionary with us. Should the county attorney say, no, it's only 9, the alternates can't participate in deliberations. I think we as a board could, under 315104, which is organization and meetings, under subpart 10, it states a study commission may establish advisory boards and committees, including on them persons who are not members of the study commission. What's the point of an advisory board but to hear the opinions of those on the advisory board? The alternates could easily be considered an advisory board under us, and that's within our power to do. And it's specific. It says people who aren't members of the study commission can be included. So what's the point of an advisory board if you can't hear from them? So I think there's a little bit of latitude here. I agree that there is a 9-member limit. It's in the words of the statute. I'm not sure what to make of Phil's analysis, distinguishing between, the public participation phase, where now we're moving into the deliberations phase. It's an interesting point. I think it would benefit from someone within the county government who fulfills the county attorney function weighing in on this. I agree with your points about this is not a commission where well, it is a commission. It's recommendations that are made. At some point, someone may decide to initiate a legal challenge to it. We ought to make sure that we're in compliance with the law. Maybe to this point during this phase where we're interviewing people, maybe we have run afoul of that. Maybe we didn't notice these things previously. You know, personally, I'd like to hear more opinions, not less. And I think that even if the county attorney returned with a decision that said, look, this runs afoul technically of the words of the statute, I think there's room for us to allow alternates to serve in an advisory board and still have their voices heard, and that's clearly contemplated within this statute. And there is no distinction between, you know, a study phase versus a deliberation phase. It's not caveated that way. So those are some of my thoughts. I think first and foremost, I'd like to hear from the county attorney. This is a person who specializes in this. That's his elected function, and I think we ought to take advantage of that expertise before acting on this motion. So I actually not sure of the procedure for doing it, but I think it would be wise to table this until such time as we had that input from the county attorney. Thank you.
Sherry?
Well, my interpretation of you allowing us to be part of the questioning process is obviously very different from others. I thought that it was a kindness on your part and the other 9 members to keep us engaged, because as an alternate, it's kind of like a theatrical production. You know, you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for something to happen, and it's pretty boring if you're not able to participate in some form or fashion. So my view was that this was a method to keep us engaged and able to have some expression. But that was where my interpretation kind of then stopped, because, well, not my interpretation didn't stop. My feelings was then, thank you for allowing us to be engaged in this process, for allowing us to participate in the questions. I really actually appreciate that. But I don't think that I need to be part of the hammering out some of the other issues. I don't have a problem now, because I have learned so much from this process, and I'm actually okay with sitting back and listening, because even if I'm not part of the deliberation process, I'm not being kicked out. Just like everybody else here, anybody that wants to be here can be here. And so I'm not being kicked out. I'm actually able to continue to participate, but in a less prominent role. Just like somebody that's the backup or the alternate on a theatrical production, you know, they don't influence the play. And that's the way I view my position. I'm an alternate, I'm a backup, I'm not an influencer until somebody else steps out. And then because I've been adequately engaged, then I can walk in and fill the shoes of whoever it is that I'm filling his shoes for. So I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think that there's an issue of transparency if I'm not involved in deliberations. I also think that this was brought up 6 weeks ago, and you should have talked to the lawyer 6 weeks ago about it. So.
I can acknowledge that.
Yeah, so putting it off on the lawyer, you know, you're a lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. I can understand. But it was brought up 6 weeks ago, and it's not, getting an okay from the lawyer is, I think, you know, we like to have as many blessings as possible in this process, but I don't feel like I'm being cheated or I'm not being allowed to participate, because I have been allowed to participate, and I greatly appreciate, as an alternate, the ability that you have afforded me to participate at this time. The other thing is, I do agree with Phil. I don't want any legal challenges coming up because we did something out of order. And effectively, we're supposed to be 9 members. You have been, you did the good deed, but as I say, no good deed goes unpunished, because now the envelope is being pushed. And you've got, because you allowed that, then the next, we want more. And then because we want more, who's to say the next step isn't like, well, we want to vote, even though we're not supposed to be able to vote? So I do appreciate actually kind of bringing our focus back to the original intention. And, you know, if you want to go from a 3-member Board of County Commissioners to a 5-member, 7-member Board of County Commissioners, I can see how this definitely would be what you would support by actually advocating from 9 to 12. So I'm A-okay with being an alternate and a backup and sitting on the sidelines a little bit more, like our members back here.
Thank you. Kurt?
So, Sherry, to your point that Brian had 6 weeks that he could have invoked legal opinion, it wasn't until tonight that a legal pretense was put on this. And so I think that's an unfair characterization. It was brought up as a, let's save time, because, oh, it's going to take us so much more time out of the 7 months that we have left in the statutory limit for our committee to listen to 3 more people. I think that's specious, and I'm against it.
Dave?
I went back and looked at the video on May 17th when we actually made a decision to allow the alternates to be part of the discussion. And the key word is discussion. And I wonder if we do go back to legal and ask a question, I would question whether we're actually moving into deliberations at this moment anyway. Because if you look at the open meeting law, deliberations, in my experience as a chair, and Joan, maybe your experience, has been after a public hearing, and you deliberate the final recommendation. We may have misnamed what we're actually going into, which is recommendation phase. We're developing a recommendation. We're not getting public, we could even get additional public input during the recommendation phase if we choose, which is equivalent to the alternates. My problem, and I thought about this long and hard, would I have made a decision on May 17th differently than we did? And the answer is, if we had this kind of discussion on May 17th, I may have changed my vote from wanting alternates to be there to maybe not. I don't know, but we didn't. And the timing of this, or any kind of procedural change on how we operate right now, is concerning to me. There may be some people who want to change how we vote. We've been voting with our hands. Usually you vote by roll call on important decisions. I don't want to change that now. So I'd rather, unless there was a compelling legal reason, and I would rather just continue as we go. The time constraints are not big. We've been spending a lot of time. But I do really think this is really a discussion recommendation phase than it more is a deliberation phase. From a legal perspective, just based on, Joan, do you think that's probably clearer to what you do with the airport board? Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, if that is true, then there's no legal reason why we couldn't allow alternates to participate. That's my comment.
Kristen?
Well, I can say this in 2 sentences. I am consistent. I was one of the 2 votes to restrict active participation of alternates on May, whatever it was, and I stand by my original decision.
We need to go around again. Brian?
I have one additional point that builds on what David Levine was saying was, back on the May 26th meeting, I presented this table. In the table, what I characterized what we're heading into now is not as deliberations, but as discussion. And I think that pulls in with your point. So, take from it what you will, but I mean, this was a document I prepared at the time, and it was considered discussion, and it was previous to action. The thing after discussion was kind of action. It was the next step. So if your reasoning is, sound, You know, I think, at least I had in this outline characterized as what we're headed into as discussion. Discuss optional forms of government as authorized per Idaho Code Title 31, Chapter 50. So,
Anyone else?
oh, one other thing, Dave, is, God forbid, one of us drops dead, or, you know, other means of not serving on this commission, but to not have the alternate's views expressed up to that point, I think is not good. If somebody who is serving in the member position did have to drop off, and you have no idea what any of the alternates are thinking, I think that leaves you in a bit of a not as good a position as if you did have that benefit of their input, for what it's worth.
Bert?
Yeah, I was going to point that out too, just from the point of view of keeping the alternates engaged. We want you engaged so that you could step in if the lead player got sick some night, or whatever, won the lottery and decided they didn't care about the county anymore. Who knows? So I don't think that a jury going back into the jury room is a good analogy, because we are not closing off the open meetings. We are not going into executive session. And so I don't think that's a fair analogy.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the policy as you read it, if you'll read it.
I will second that motion.
A rereading, Article 9, Section 5. Alternates may participate in meeting discussions during the information gathering phase, but shall not participate in deliberations nor vote on agenda items until and unless appointed as a commission member. Okay.
Can I just ask the question, so are we not worrying about the legal side of this or not? I think there was questions about the legal side, so are we making the motion, and if we approve the motion, is that to confirm with legal that what we did is okay?
Well, I was going to suggest that an amendment to the amendment, which is to table this pending legal opinion. So we could either vote it down or we could vote to table it pending legal opinion.
Are you suggesting that the alternates not participate until after we get a legal opinion?
No, I'm suggesting that they continue as has been per the current bylaws until such time as we get a legal opinion.
You're making an amendment, in other words.
I'm amending the motion, yeah.
No, he's making a motion to table the,
Yeah,
he's not amending. he's
moving
making
to
a motion.
table the, yeah.
Okay, we don't follow Roberts here strictly. Is there a second on the motion to table? Vote to table the motion? Let's make a change here. I would like to take this motion, this vote, as a roll call vote, so that we know who has done it. I do not like the idea of going forward and people saying, oh, you miscounted hands, or you didn't understand the numbers of ayes and nays.
That's fine.
So I
But
would like to
again-
make this,
We can call for a roll call. Roll calls are
roll
usually by exception.
I know, but now, again, we're changing the way we operate.
No.
Yes, we are.
That is.
we have been able, anyone has been able to call for a roll call vote at any time
Yes.
during this. And I am calling for a roll call
Yeah,
vote.
we just haven't had an occasion.
So
to do
you're okay with changing that? You're just trying to figure out, why do you want that to be a roll call vote when you don't want other things to be a roll call vote? I just want to, I feel like this is becoming a political hot potato, and it's not that big of a deal. The deal is that we're not in deliberations, at least in my view, that the alternates have been, we passed a motion to have them be part of the discussion, and that's what we're doing. They can't vote on a recommendation, but they could discuss it. But now to go, again, my view is that anything we change, for whatever reason we change it, will be looked at by different people, different ways. It could be the right intent, it could be the right intention, but the last thing we need is more theories about what this group is doing, is just my view. But again, I'm only 1 out of 9.
Well, I'll counter that and say that usually roll call votes are done on an exceptional basis and can be called by anybody. Anyone can ask for a roll call vote traditionally in a deliberative arrangement.
In a
So
deliberative
they
arrangement.
may not be customary,
Uh-huh.
but they can be called for on an exceptional basis. And Dave is asking for it on an exceptional basis. I don't view that as a change of procedure.
So any one of us, and I don't know that, I don't know the procedure, I don't know the rule, but any one of us can call for a roll call vote at any time.
Yeah,
Yes.
if there's a vote coming up, you can request that it be done by
Okay,
vote.
did not know that.
So
Okay, sorry.
Kurt, sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I'm done.
For clarification, what you're saying is we continue as we've been for these last 4.5 months. Nothing changes, and we wait till we hear back from legal.
Yes, at which time we reconsider the motion based on what legal brings back to us or sends back to us.
So the other option is we just go ahead and take a vote, see what happens, and then we
It's
don't table
The
this.
first motion usually is the one you vote on first.
Except typically,
I
the
believe
motion to table
motion,
takes precedence.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be quiet.
I'd like a clarification here. Who is going to be the individual who takes this to the county attorney? Would that be the chair?
That would be Nancy.
That would be Nancy?
I think I would
Okay.
have to.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I'm sorry?
I believe technically.
Not the bylaws, but I think the statute itself speaks to the chairman transmitting requests to county officials. That
So-
would include the prosecutor.
Basically, Dave.
I'll tell Nancy,
Yeah,
and Nancy will
yeah,
pass it on.
Yeah, okay.
So if you need help.
I just wanted to make
crafting it-
sure that we weren't gonna come back next week and the next week and nobody's actually asked the county attorney.
So if you need help crafting it, talk to me and I can help you, but
Okay.
whatever.
I'll talk to you afterward about whether we have to craft something or whether we can just hand them this and ask for an opinion.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, with all the documents, yeah.
Okay. I believe we have a motion to table and a second.
Tomorrow, seconded.
Okay. Roll call vote. Kurt Anderson?
Aye for tabling.
Okay.
Turning the mic on, aye for tabling.
Tamara Bateson?
Aye for tabling.
Nay for tabling? Brian Bushling?
Aye for tabling.
Brian Cleary?
Aye.
Bob Fish?
Aye.
David Levine?
Yes.
Phil Ward?
No.
Kristen Wing?
No. As I said, if anything, I'm consistent.
We have 6 ayes, 3 noes. We will table the motion.
You're a no. Dave. Oh, Dave is a no?
I was a no.
He didn't announce his name.
Okay.
I guess he figured he'd recognize his voice.
Yeah, I'm so hard to recognize.
You called everyone else out.
Yes, I did. Okay. Moving forward, discuss the format. The objective has been for everyone who's participating to have a chance to speak so that no one is overrun and silenced. We have been going around the circle in order to achieve that objective. I see no reason to change that at this time. If someone makes a comment and someone refutes that, the original commenter should have a chance to respond. But I don't want to get caught up in a continuous response. So what I would like to do is, if someone refutes something, someone needs to respond. I would like a single response to it. I don't want to get caught up in he said, he said, he said, he said. We don't need to waste that time. Or she said. Okay.
So how does that go? You just wait until it comes around the table again to respond to the earlier
No, I would
comment?
say if someone has, if your position is X and someone has come out not X, you are, and specifically in response to you, not just, I didn't agree with you, then you have a chance to respond. If your reason is, the sky is blue and someone comes out and says, you're crazy, the sky's not blue, you have a chance to respond to that. If you're simply saying I'm for X and somebody else says I'm for not X, that wouldn't be enough to require a response.
Actually, we've had an example here tonight. Phil spoke. I think Bruce took it kind of personally. Somehow it became kind of about Bruce, and so he went, and Phil wanted to know, are you addressing this to me? Am I
Yeah, I was
supposed to
here.
respond or not?
did
So
see.
I think that's the example he's dealing with. So those little things, it kind of went back and forth there for a while, and then it moved on. So I think that's a good example from tonight.
Do I hear any objections to the suggestion? Okay, that will be the format then, that we will try to follow. And I believe we are in not discussion, but deliberations, because I believe we're going to be moving and voting on things as we go. Not necessarily a long discussion and then coming in later. It makes sense if we're all in agreement on X, then we resolve X at this time and not have to go back to it in 6 weeks later.
When we go to legal, can we ask them if we actually are technically in deliberations? I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, Dave, that once we need to just address an issue and make a decision and move on. That's a recommendation. I agree with that. I just have a different view of deliberations, and that has ramifications. So if it is, then that says something. If it is, deliberations traditionally does not allow public comment. So I just would like to have the right word.
Would you define deliberations as far as you understand it?
The deliberations that I understand it is the process after the public comment. What happens usually is a proposal goes out to the public. They have 30 days in advance. It goes out to the public, and notice is given. The public has chances to comment on the recommendation or the change in whatever you're doing, okay? Then there's a public hearing. At the public hearing, additional comments are received by the public. Then the public comment phase is closed. And then the commission deliberates to make a recommendation to the county commissioners. So the difference is that at that time, it is only 9 people. So when we have a public hearing, for certain, once we have a public hearing and the public comment period is closed, without a doubt, there'll be 9 people deliberating, because that is, public comment section is closed. So that's what I'm just trying to gather. I think this is more of a recommendation phase, which most commissions have. And you vote on those recommendations and you do that, and that becomes the basis of what information goes to the citizens for them to review prior to the public hearing.
Sounds reasonable to request legal opinion on that?
Yeah, so I think if they say it's a deliberations, that's fine, but they may come back and just say it is a recommendation, period, and public comments are allowed.
I know it's not a formal motion and we're not voting, but does
Yeah.
anyone have an objection to Dave's request?
No, just, I think it would be helpful to, if the county attorney does say yes, it would be helpful to understand what the ramifications or the implications of that are, because they may or may not be exactly what Dave is
Yeah,
envisioning.
I guarantee
So-
it's not.
I agree. We needed a definition of
Yeah.
deliberation,
Yeah.
as well as a determination when we go into deliberation.
If ever. Yeah.
If it has an effect.
Yeah, right.
It may not have an effect.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I will add that to the question to the attorney, that we will be presiding on the tabled motion. Okay, format, we are, I believe, in agreement on how to pass the format. So we'll go forward from there. Then what I have been calling deliberation, which may be a discussion or an internal comment. We'll have to figure that out. The suggestion I made several weeks ago was that each person would have about 10 minutes to give presentation of what they think they've been hearing, what they have done their own research, and present their position to the commission at this time. Is that amenable? Objections?
I've just a question of clarification. Don't we need the opinion from legal at this point before we can really proceed? Because we don't know if we're deliberating or discussing at this point. And we will have potentially the three alternates making comments at this point. So I don't know
Even
that
if we are, wouldn't Brian's discovery of an advisory role cover that case?
Not necessarily, because we're not formally creating an advisory board and waiting for responses from the advisory board.
It doesn't say you have to wait for responses.
What Brian was reading to us is that we can create an advisory board.
Yes. And then it doesn't say anything about how you go about engaging with that board.
And what we're suggesting here is that each person would be giving an opinion as we go, rather than as a board.
Again, if we ask the individual members of the board to state their personal opinions, I think that's perfectly in line with the flexibility that we're allowed. And if, honestly, I think the boogeyman of somebody challenging our recommendation in court is really just a boogeyman. I don't think that there is a monster under the bed, because ultimately the ballot, if something goes to the ballot, it is done by the county commissioners. They can do what we recommend, or they can do whatever they want to make up. They have no obligation, despite their personal assurances, that they would take what we have and put it on the ballot. There is no need for them to do so. And so I don't see that there's going to be any justification for challenging a ballot measure based on what we do or don't do, and what we do or do not call our alternates.
Well, unfortunately.
And I realize I'm not a lawyer.
Unfortunately, every lawyer can come up with an excuse for why to challenge something. And if there was a challenge, it could halt the placement of it on the ballot.
Can I make maybe a suggestion? Is we just finished the information gathering sessions. Can't we just include this go around the table as the summary of the information gathering period? Because that's what it really is. It's what we heard during the information period. And take out the whole discussion of whether this is deliberations or not. It's just the end of the period of time that we said alternates can participate in discussions.
We didn't put a limit on alternates participating in the original bylaws.
Understand that, but I think Brian's question is, do we run the risk of allowing them to do that tonight without legal opinion? And what I was trying to do was find a way to allow them to do it without jeopardizing whatever potential risk we would have. And it is in the spirit of that. Now, what I don't know, Dave, is we have the word deliberations on the agenda. I don't know if it matters or not. But again, that's my only suggestion, is if we want to play it safe, we just call it the wrap-up for information gathering.
Well, technically, we're still in the information gathering stage because we haven't had the public hearing. And that is part of the information gathering stage.
Yeah.
And we stipulated that we can go back to certain officials and ask them questions, clarify issues, have them come back. So that's still information gathering, and that still is at our disposal. So I don't think the information gathering phase is complete.
No, Tamara, the information gathering phase is complete, because we are not going to be calling people back unless we have specific questions.
But that's still gathering information.
No, that is resolving an issue. What we're looking at here,
That's semantics.
what we're looking at here, and it's
This
all
has all been
semantics.
semantics. This whole thing has been semantics. It's just like,
What we're
yeah.
looking at here is we're moving beyond information gathering. I would be quite open at this point to someone making a motion tonight to move on something that we have to deal with. If that happens, then that means we are in deliberations. If someone were to make a motion tonight to appoint an official or to guarantee the election of an official, that would be appropriate within deliberations.
Again, I'm not sure that we have our terminology clearly defined. So,
Well,
I mean,
that's-
based on what Dave was just saying, based on, I mean, it's coming to some sort of a decision. I mean, even if we go back to the original kind of paradigm that Brian laid out, this was discussions leading to a recommendation. It wasn't designated as deliberations. So I'm not sure that, maybe what we ought to do is just adjourn at this point until we get an opinion back from legal, if this is so important to the validity of the work we were doing.
Is that a motion?
Do people feel that this is a sufficient threat to the time that we've invested, that we should not imperil our work until we hear from county legal?
And we've already tabled the first motion.
Right.
We've moved into a position where the motion would have denied the opportunity for participation by the alternates.
I mean, the other option.
We have decided that we need to go for a legal opinion. I think Bryant has a definite position here that if we're going for legal position, we can't move forward until we get it.
Well, the other option that we could do is that we could go around and hear from half of the group and make sure that none of that half includes alternates tonight. And then come back next week and with any luck have input from county legal by then and proceed accordingly. So we don't completely waste the night and people's trips down here.
Brian?
Alternately, building on what you're saying, would be to take a 15-minute break and call the county attorney. Sometimes an oral opinion on something like this can be delivered quickly, and maybe not. Maybe he might say, I'd rather have the benefit of looking at it a little bit, but just a way to keep things moving. But shy of that, there is your idea, which is not a bad one, of just go around with the people that,
I
aren't
would say
alternates.
half. Let's pick half just as we'll go through 6 people tonight. And that'll take us an hour if everyone takes their 10 minutes. And then we can come back next week. That'll have given the county attorney a chance to respond. And then we deal with the results from the county attorney and then continue with our discussions.
Maybe I'm
Before we
being
go any further
obtuse
with
here, but
this-
I don't understand, why would you pick half? Why would, we either do it or we don't do it? I mean, I don't understand why it's okay for 6, but it's not okay for 12.
He's saying,
I'm not
of
following.
of the 9 that we
Yes.
know are
Clean.
right?
Kosher.
Right, that, I don't know if we pick 4.5, but,
Yeah.
pick 4 or 5 and let them start and get through that and then come
Call
back
it a
the
night,
following
yeah.
week, call it a night. That way we make progress and none of the alternates would participate tonight. And by the time next week we convene, we would presumably have the opinion from the attorney and know whether they can participate or not, so.
Before
Well-
we go any further, Nancy, is it possible for us to reach the county attorney tonight?
I believe he would need time to look at the statute. I don't know that he knows it off the top of his head. So I would feel more comfortable giving him time to read the statute and make that determination instead of putting the pressure on him for tonight.
That's
That
fair.
makes sense to me,
That's
to
fair.
our 2 lawyers.
That's fair.
Okay, at this point then, I think we need to look at perhaps ending this, adjourning, until we can come back with a legal opinion.
Okay,
Which
I'll
was
move to
what
adjourn.
Bryant suggested, right?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, second? Okay, we have a second. Vote to adjourn? We are adjourned.